Keanu Reeves walked onto the stage of The Tonight Show, and the crowd almost exploded with excitement. People clapped and cheered so loudly that even the band smiled wider. The energy in the studio felt bright and familiar. Yet something quiet and strange moved under the noise. Because tonight Keanu was holding a small wooden box in his hand, simple and old, like something precious that did not belong to television. He walked with his usual calm steps, shoulders relaxed, eyes soft. And when he reached the desk, he placed the box very gently in front of him, like it carried something fragile, maybe a memory, maybe a secret. The cameras caught the way his fingers released the lid, careful and respectful. And for a brief second, the whole studio seemed to breathe in together, as if waiting without knowing why they were waiting. Jimmy Fallon stepped forward with his big familiar smile, his voice full of warmth as he welcomed Keanu. He shook his hand with respect and a hint of playful curiosity. But his eyes kept drifting back to the wooden box on the desk. The box sat between them like a third guest, silent but powerful. The studio lights bounced softly off its surface, making it glow in a gentle way that pulled everyone's attention toward it. Usually the opening moments of the show felt fast and full of jokes, but tonight the pace was slower, not boring, but strangely focused. The band played softer, the audience leaned forward, and even the crew behind the cameras seemed unusually attentive. Inside the control room, the director watched the monitors and felt something different. This did not feel like a regular celebrity interview. It felt like the opening of a story that would not leave people easily. Keanu sat down, adjusted his jacket with a small, modest gesture, then folded his hands calmly. He glanced at the box for a moment and then at Jimmy, and his expression carried both shyness and quiet confidence. Jimmy started with light questions about movies, training, and funny on-set moments, and Keanu answered with gentle humor. His tone relaxed and kind, every answer brought smiles and a few laughs. But under the laughter, something was building. Something unspoken that kept returning to that little wooden box between them. Whenever the audience laughed, their eyes would quickly come back to the box. Jimmy noticed it and laughed to himself inside. Even he, the king of curiosity and chaos, felt a strange patience tonight. He did not rush toward the mystery. He circled around it, like he knew that whatever was inside deserved a respectful entrance. The control room prepared closer shots of the desk, waiting for the moment when the lid would finally lift. After a while, Jimmy rested his arm near the box and relaxed his voice. He thanked Keanu for being there and for always bringing calm, positive energy. He mentioned how people online often talked about Keanu's kindness, how every story about him somehow involved patience, humility, or small acts of respect. Keanu lowered his eyes for a second, almost embarrassed, then looked back up with a soft smile that felt real, not forced for the cameras. Instead of brushing off the compliment with a quick joke, Keanu did something different. He turned slightly toward the audience and began talking about the people no one usually sees clearly. He spoke about the crew members who roll cables, clean floors, adjust lights, check sound, and stay long after the applause fades. He shared how many times he had watched tired faces keep working with quiet dignity. His words were simple, but the way he said them made the entire room feel seen. The audience grew quiet, not in discomfort, but in deep attention. Jimmy listened more than he spoke, which was rare for him. He nodded and smiled gently as Keanu described how kindness from one person could sometimes carry an entire day for someone else. Keanu's voice did not preach. It just told small truths, like how a smile at the right time could feel like shelter, and how one respectful word could stop someone from giving up inside. Then Jimmy tapped the box lightly with a single finger and broke the deep moment with humor. He joked that the box was starting to feel like a mysterious guest with powerful secrets. The audience laughed again, grateful for the lighter tone. But the tension did not really fade. It simply changed shape. Now it felt like a warm suspense rather than a heavy one. Keanu looked at the box with a thoughtful expression, as if deciding whether the world was ready for what it carried. He finally said that the box was not expensive, not magical, and not dangerous. He said it was full of something very ordinary, just paper, nothing shiny, nothing digital. Still, he added that the paper inside had changed the feeling of more than one workplace, more than one day, and maybe more than one person. Jimmy raised his eyebrows and laughed, partly from confusion and partly from excitement. The audience reacted with another wave of curious sounds and soft laughter. Keanu then shared that one evening many years earlier, he had walked near a studio where The Tonight Show was recording. Someone had joked there that even his mistakes probably looked polite, that even when he messed up he would apologize in the kindest way. The comment had been playful and friendly, everyone laughed, and the moment passed. but the sentence stayed with him like a small stone in his pocket, light but impossible to completely forget. He explained that at first he simply smiled whenever he remembered that line, but during a particularly difficult filming period, when people were stressed and small problems kept piling up, the memory of that joke suddenly changed for him. On one long, exhausting night, he wondered what would happen if he actually turned that idea into a real experiment, if he made politeness so common and exaggerated that it almost became funny again, yet still real enough to soften heavy days. So he began carrying small pieces of paper with him. At first, it was only a few, then more. He started writing short notes whenever something went wrong on set. Sometimes it was a light that flickered, sometimes a door that refused to close smoothly, sometimes a scene that took too many takes, sometimes just a tense silence after an argument instead of complaining or staying quiet. He would leave an anonymous apology note somewhere nearby, not signed, just gentle words. The notes never blamed anyone. They never mentioned names. They did not even explain details. They simply said things like, "Sorry, this moment felt heavy. You are doing your best." Or, "You matter more than you think today." Some notes thanked people for their patience. Others encouraged them to keep going even if no one noticed their effort. Every time he placed a note, Keanu felt like he was dropping a tiny invisible light into a dark hallway. As he continued, he noticed something subtle happen around him. The mood on set would shift in quiet ways. Someone who found a note taped near their station would smile slightly more that day. Sometimes crew members who rarely spoke to each other began sharing small jokes. People still got tired and frustrated, but the edge of anger seemed softer. There was more forgiveness in the air, more understanding that everyone carried something unseen on their shoulders. Jimmy listened with his mouth slightly open and his eyes shining. The audience was completely silent now. No coughs, no whispers, only breathing and the low, quiet hum of the studio lights. The crew behind the cameras stood a little straighter. Many of them had lived long days exactly like the ones Keanu described. Some of them suddenly wondered what it might feel like to find a gentle note waiting on a hard day. Keanu touched the lid of the wooden box with his fingers and smiled quietly. He said that the box now held many of those notes. Some were original ones he had kept. Some were copies of messages that people had later shared back with him, a small collection of written kindness, born from one lighthearted joke and a few difficult nights. Jimmy laughed softly and said that this was the strangest and kindest experiment he had ever heard about on his own show. For a second, Keanu looked around the studio, at the audience, at the cameras, at the crew standing near the walls. He seemed to measure the room not as a star, but as a person deciding whether to open his heart a little more. Then he said something that made the air feel even thicker and more meaningful. He said that some of those notes were never meant to be seen again. But tonight, he was thinking of opening the box right here and letting the world see what quiet kindness really looked like on paper. The crowd reacted with a mix of laughter and a soft wave of surprise. Jimmy grinned from ear to ear. His curiosity had grown into something close to awe. This was no ordinary show story. This was emotional, human, and strangely suspenseful. He leaned closer to the box as if it might speak on its own. The cameras moved in. The music faded into silence, and every person in that room waited for Keanu's next move. Feeling that whatever happened now could touch them in ways they did not fully understand yet. Keanu kept his hand on the wooden box for a moment, and the entire studio seemed to freeze in place. The audience leaned forward without thinking, and Fallon sat perfectly still. The usual playful chaos of the show felt far away, replaced by a soft, warm suspense that wrapped itself around every person in the room. Even the stage lights seemed quieter as they glowed against the box. Jimmy finally broke the silence with a gentle laugh. He said he had hosted many guests, musicians, actors, comedians, even presidents, but he had never felt so curious about a simple wooden box. The audience laughed lightly, but there was nervous energy behind their smiles. Keanu looked at Jimmy with calm, kind eyes, like he was preparing to share something deeply personal, something that needed respect more than jokes. Keanu leaned back in his chair and began telling a slower story. A story about a time when he felt disconnected from the world, when every day felt like he was walking through a long hallway with no windows. He spoke in soft, steady words, never dramatic, but honest enough that the room grew a little colder. He described how even successful people sometimes carried invisible weight that no one noticed, and how silent pressure could make the world feel too heavy to hold. Jimmy listened without interrupting. His smile faded into genuine concern. He nodded carefully, giving Keanu space to continue. The audience felt the shift and grew completely silent. No one shuffled, no one coughed. Everyone respected the moment. As Keanu described a day when he arrived on a movie set feeling like he had nothing left to give. He said he had walked past tired crew members and wondered how they kept going when he could barely breathe inside. Then he shared the moment when everything changed. A lighting assistant had tripped over a cable and dropped an entire panel. The crash was loud and embarrassing, and the assistant froze in fear, expecting anger or blame. Keanu remembered feeling a strange pull in his chest when he saw that fear. He said he suddenly realized that everyone on that set, including him, was carrying something heavy inside their mind, and maybe all anyone needed was a small, quiet gesture of kindness. Instead of frustration, he walked toward the assistant and apologized softly for being in the way, even though he had done nothing wrong. The assistant blinked in confusion and then laughed nervously. The tension broke like thin glass, and Keanu felt a spark of light inside him, a spark he had not felt in a long time. It was small but real, a reminder that kindness could shift the energy of an entire moment. He said that night he started writing small notes, simple words on thin pieces of paper. He wrote things like "You are doing great" or "I'm thankful for your effort today." He left the notes on toolboxes, behind monitors, near cables, and inside break rooms. He watched how people discovered them, how they smiled quietly, how their shoulders relaxed, how the set slowly transformed into a safer, more peaceful place. Jimmy leaned closer and asked what happened when the crew realized the notes were all from him. The audience laughed softly at the question, but Keanu only smiled with gentle mischief. He explained that the crew never found out, at least not then. He wrote each note anonymously, letting people believe they came from someone they never expected. Maybe a friend, maybe a stranger, maybe the universe itself. He wanted kindness to feel magical rather than credited. He said the wooden box on Jimmy's desk held some of those very notes, saved from different sets, different years, different moments when someone needed a reminder that they were not alone. He kept them not to show off, but to remind himself that even small acts mattered. Jimmy placed his hand on his heart and whispered that the world needed more people like that. The audience clapped softly, not in excitement, but in respect. Keanu looked around the studio and spoke about how people often forget the power of small gestures. He said that heavy hearts rarely need grand speeches. They only need one quiet sentence at the right time. He looked at the stage crew, the camera operators, the writers, and the assistants standing near the walls. He thanked them for their work, for their patience, for their unseen effort that made the show possible every night. Some crew members wiped away tears quietly. Jimmy then asked a simple but important question. He asked why Keanu brought the box today. Why now? Why on this show of all places? The audience held their breath waiting for the answer. Keanu paused for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edges of the wooden lid. He said he came because he felt something shifting in the world. People seemed more tired, more overwhelmed, more lost in noise and pressure. He wanted to remind them that quiet kindness still mattered. He said he brought the box because he wanted to open it with someone who understood humor and humanity at the same time, someone who could hold both in the same moment without breaking the balance. He gestured to Jimmy with a warm smile, and Jimmy smiled back, touched and humbled. The audience reacted with soft, emotional applause that filled the studio like warm air. Before Jimmy could ask another question, Keanu looked straight into the camera, his expression serious yet gentle. He said that the next thing he was about to reveal was not just funny, but deeply meaningful. It was the turning point of his experiment, the moment when everything changed in a way he never expected. The audience gasped quietly, their curiosity climbing even higher. Jimmy leaned forward with wide eyes and whispered, "Tell us what happened." The crew prepared tighter shots. The lights dimmed slightly, and the studio felt like the opening scene of a film. Keanu looked at the box again, then at Jimmy, then at the audience. Something heavy and hopeful sat in his eyes, as if the next part of the story would open a door that no one was ready for, yet everyone needed. And with a calm, slow breath, he said he would share the turning point, but not yet. He wanted the moment to be right. He wanted everyone listening to understand why the smallest note in that box meant more than all the others combined. Jimmy laughed nervously from suspense. The audience erupted in soft, excited noise, and Keanu smiled with that gentle mystery that only he could hold so naturally. Keanu kept his eyes on the wooden box as the studio lights softened around him. The audience shifted in their seats with quiet anticipation. Jimmy Fallon leaned closer with a mix of excitement and tension on his face, and even the camera operators adjusted their grip as if preparing for something meaningful. The energy in the room now felt different, heavier yet inviting, like everyone was standing at the edge of a story they did not want to miss. Keanu took a slow breath before speaking, his voice dropping into a softer tone. He said that the experiment with the apology notes had begun as a simple act, something small and personal, but what happened next surprised even him. He believed kindness could shift a mood, but he never expected it to create waves far beyond his reach. He explained that one particular note inside the box carried a story that changed everything for him. Jimmy raised his eyebrows, intrigued but patient. He told Keanu to take his time. The audience stayed silent as Keanu began describing a long, difficult filming day on a set far from the city. He remembered the cold air, the heavy equipment, and the tired faces of the crew. Each person moved with slow steps, pushing through exhaustion, and he saw the weight of stress pressing on all of them, including himself. He noticed one worker in particular, a quiet man who adjusted lights on tall metal stands. The man always arrived early and stayed late, yet no one seemed to know his name very well. Keanu said he often saw the man rubbing his eyes, yawning behind a curtain, or standing alone during breaks. One evening, Keanu saw him sitting on a crate with his head lowered, his hands trembling slightly, and something inside Keanu told him that this man needed a note more than anyone else that day. So Keanu reached into his pocket, pulled out a piece of folded paper, and wrote a simple message. The words were short and gentle, something like, "Sorry today felt heavier than usual. You are doing amazing and someone notices." He left the note near the man's toolbox, never expecting anything more than a small smile. He walked away quietly, hoping the message might give the man one moment of comfort. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere on set felt warmer, lighter, and strangely unified. People seemed to greet each other more kindly. Conversations were friendlier, and several crew members whispered to each other about a mysterious note someone had found. They described how the man who discovered it had walked into the studio with more energy than usual, as if a shadow had lifted off his shoulders overnight. Jimmy listened with wide eyes and asked if the man ever discovered who wrote the note. Keanu shook his head gently and said no, at least not at that time. The man simply believed it came from someone generous on set, maybe a friend, maybe a stranger, maybe someone who understood silent pain. The audience reacted with soft, emotional murmurs, touched by the subtle chain reaction that one quiet message had created. Keanu said that as the days passed, something remarkable happened. More notes began appearing around the set, but these were not written by him. Different crew members began leaving their own words of encouragement. Some were funny, some were caring, some were clumsy but honest. Soon the entire set became a place filled with small reminders of hope. The wooden box he kept eventually became a home for the notes people shared back with him. Jimmy placed his hand on the desk. Stunned by the story, he said he had never heard anything like this in all his years of hosting. He asked what the twist was, what the real turning point would be, because he knew Keanu was guiding them toward something deeper, something that had changed him in a way that still lived inside him today. The audience leaned in again, holding their breath without realizing they were doing it. Keanu nodded slowly and looked directly at the box, his expression shifting into something softer, more emotional. He said that one day he found a note that did not look like the others. It was placed neatly on top of one of his props. The handwriting was shaky and uneven, and the paper was a little torn at the edges. Something about the way it was folded made his heart beat faster before he even opened it. He said that when he unfolded the paper, he felt his chest tighten. The message was written by the same quiet lighting assistant he had first given a note to. But this message was longer and filled with emotion. The man thanked the unknown writer for the small piece of kindness that had changed his life. He said the note had arrived on a night when he felt like giving up entirely, not on the job, but on everything. His voice trembled as he explained how that single message pulled him back from a dark place. The studio fell dead silent. People wiped their eyes, and even Jimmy's voice softened as he whispered, asking what happened next. Keanu said that the note ended with a line he would never forget, a line that still stayed with him every day of his life. The assistant had written, "You saved me without knowing me, and I hope one day I can do the same for someone else." Keanu paused and let the words settle in the room like falling snow. Jimmy stared at the wooden box and asked if that note was still inside. Keanu nodded. He said it was the reason he kept the box, the reason he carried it tonight, the reason he believed kindness could reach places deeper than anyone imagined. He knew that the world often dismissed gentle actions as small or meaningless, but he had witnessed how one quiet message had pulled someone back from despair. Then Keanu lowered his voice even further and said something that caused a cold shiver to run through the entire audience. He said that after receiving that note, another strange event happened on set. something that made him feel like the experiment had grown beyond kindness and into something mysterious, something he still did not fully understand, something that scared him a little but also inspired him. Jimmy leaned forward, barely breathing, and asked what happened. Keanu looked at him with steady eyes and said that the night after he found the assistant's letter, an unknown person left a note for him, a note he never expected, a note that hinted someone had been watching him closely, someone who knew more than he thought, someone who wrote a message that would change everything again. Keanu kept his gaze steady on the wooden box as the air in the studio grew tighter and thicker. The audience sat in absolute silence, and Fallon rested both hands on the desk like he needed support. The cameras zoomed in slowly, capturing the quiet tension around Keanu's face. Every person in the room felt that something unexpected was coming, something that would shift the entire meaning of the story he had been telling. Keanu said the night he received the assistant's emotional letter was a turning point. But what happened afterward felt even stranger. It began when he returned to his trailer after a long, exhausting day. He remembered how the hallway lights flickered softly, how the wind outside rattled a thin metal sheet, and how the usual noise of crew members packing equipment was oddly absent. The silence felt deeper than normal, almost heavy, almost expectant. When he opened the door to his trailer, he saw something sitting on the small table near the window. It was a folded piece of paper, resting exactly in the center of the table, neatly placed, too neatly. He explained that he always locked his trailer and only a few people had access. No one had a reason to leave a note for him, and yet the paper sat there, waiting in a calm but unsettling way. Jimmy's eyes widened as he whispered, asking if he felt scared at that moment. Keanu shook his head slowly and said it was not fear. It was something closer to curiosity mixed with a strange sense of recognition. As if someone understood him more deeply than he expected, he walked toward the table, sat down, and unfolded the paper with careful fingers. The handwriting was different from the assistant's shaky letters. This writing was smooth, steady, and strangely elegant. Inside the note were only a few lines, simple yet powerful. The message thanked Keanu for the kindness he had been spreading on set, and it said that people had noticed the shift in the atmosphere. But then the tone changed. The writer added that kindness had a surprising way of revealing hidden truths about people, and that someone had been paying attention to every small gesture he made, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that suggested deeper insight into his heart. The message ended with a sentence that struck Keanu with silent force. The writer said, "You believe you are helping others, but you do not know how many people have quietly been helping you too." He felt his breath catch for a moment. He read the line again and again, trying to understand who would write something so personal, so observant, so full of awareness about the emotional shadows he had kept hidden inside himself. The audience reacted with soft gasps as the weight of the message settled in. Jimmy placed a hand over his mouth in surprise. He asked if Keanu ever found out who wrote that mysterious note. Keanu explained that he tried asking around discreetly. He asked makeup artists, stunt coordinators, camera operators, production assistants, and even some close friends on set, but no one admitted to writing it. Everyone seemed genuinely confused when he described the handwriting. Keanu said he kept the note in his pocket for days, then later placed it inside the wooden box, but something even stranger happened after that. The energy on set changed again, this time in a way he could not explain easily. People seemed more aware of their words, more gentle when handling conflict, more patient when dealing with stressful moments. It was as if the entire environment had become alive with a new sense of unity, as if invisible threads of kindness connected everyone. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, stunned and thoughtful. He said it sounded almost like someone had been watching him closely to learn from him. Keanu nodded slightly, but then revealed something even more surprising. He said that a few days later another note appeared, this time placed inside a drawer in the break room. The drawer was filled with tools and papers, and the note was hidden under them. Someone had carefully placed it where only he would find it. The second note, "Read your kindness is not quiet anymore, it echoes in the actions of others." The words were written in the same elegant handwriting, and the message felt even more mysterious. The writer seemed to understand the pattern unfolding on set, a pattern Keanu himself had not fully recognized. The writer had predicted how quickly kindness could spread from one person to another, turning small gestures into something almost powerful. Jimmy whispered that this was starting to sound like a gentle psychological mystery. The audience murmured in agreement. Keanu smiled softly and said that he felt the same. He said the notes were not threatening, they were uplifting, but they carried an unusual level of insight into his thoughts and emotions. Someone understood him in a way he did not expect. Someone who saw how deeply he believed in quiet compassion. Keanu then revealed something that made the room tighten again. He said that the third note arrived in a way that still confused him to this day. He found it not in his trailer, not on the set, but inside one of his own jacket pockets during a scene. He had no idea how it got there. He had not left the jacket unattended. No one had access to his costume area without supervision. But the note was there, folded perfectly, waiting for him like a whisper inside the fabric. Inside the note were only 5 words: "You are not working alone anymore." The sentence felt powerful and unsettling at the same time. It suggested partnership, observation, and a willingness to guide or protect. Keanu said he felt a chill run through him, not from fear, but from the realization that someone believed deeply in his quiet experiment, someone who wanted to amplify it, someone who saw value in it beyond what he imagined. The studio audience shifted again, moved by the emotional mystery. Jimmy asked if he ever confronted the possibility that the mysterious writer might be someone who admired him deeply. Keanu smiled shyly and said he considered that possibility, but something about the tone of the letters felt different, almost like the writer was not praising him, but reminding him of something he often forgot. The writer treated him like a human, not a celebrity, like someone who needed encouragement too. Keanu looked down at the box and said that part of him believed the writer saw something in him he had never recognized fully. He said the mystery became a quiet motivation to keep leaving notes, to keep spreading warmth in difficult places, because someone out there believed in the power of his intentions enough to support him from the shadows. He admitted that he felt guided by those messages, strengthened by them, humbled by them. Then he paused and looked directly at Jimmy with a gentle but serious expression. He said that what happened next was the biggest twist of all, the moment when the identity of the writer came dangerously close to being revealed. The moment when kindness and suspense collided in a way he never expected. The entire room leaned forward again, waiting for the truth to rise to the surface. Keanu rested his hands on the wooden box as if grounding himself. The studio fell into a deep hush, and Fallon sat frozen with anticipation. Even the air felt heavier, like the entire room understood that the story was about to cross into its most emotional and suspenseful moment. The cameras slowly tightened their focus on Keanu's face, capturing every quiet breath and every flicker of emotion moving through his eyes. Keanu said the mysterious notes had become a quiet part of his days. They encouraged him, surprised him, and reminded him that unseen kindness existed in places he never expected. He felt less alone, more centered, and more determined to keep spreading gentle words wherever he worked. But he admitted that the mystery also kept pulling at his thoughts. Who was watching him so closely? Who understood his heart so clearly? And why did they choose to stay hidden? Jimmy leaned forward with wide, curious eyes, asking when the truth finally began to reveal itself. Keanu took a slow breath and said it happened during a night shoot. The weather was cold, and the scene required heavy lighting equipment, dozens of cables, and long periods of waiting. The crew moved slowly under the dull glow of tall lamps, their faces tired but focused. Keanu noticed everyone was pushing through exhaustion, and he began quietly leaving notes again, slipping gentle messages into toolboxes and onto monitors. During one break, he walked behind a large set wall, hoping for a moment of silence. He leaned against a crate, breathed in deeply, and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he saw something unusual. A shadow behind another crate shifted as if someone had moved quickly out of view. Keanu stepped forward carefully, not frightened, but curious, because the movement felt familiar, almost intentional, almost like someone was watching him. He called out softly, asking if someone was there. The only answer was the quiet hum of distant generators and a cold breeze moving across the set. Keanu walked closer and discovered a piece of paper resting at the edge of the crate, folded neatly in the same exact way as the mysterious notes. His heart beat faster, not from fear but from realization. Someone had almost been caught leaving a message for him. Jimmy covered his mouth in shock and the audience gasped. Keanu said he picked up the paper with careful hands, his fingers trembling slightly. He unfolded it and saw the same elegant handwriting, but this note felt more personal than all the others. The message read, "You are not the only one who needed saving these days. You healed more hearts than you know, but you healed mine the most." The studio went silent as the words settled inside every person listening. Jimmy whispered, asking if he knew who wrote such a powerful message. Keanu said he looked around the set that night and tried to notice everyone with new eyes. He watched how people moved, how they spoke, how they carried themselves. He wondered who among them carried such emotional depth, who walked through their days quietly while offering strength to others. He said his instinct pointed toward one of the senior crew members, a person who always seemed calm, patient, and gentle with everyone. This person often checked on crew members without being noticed, offered water to tired workers, and encouraged those who were struggling with small mistakes. Their kindness reminded him of the notes, steady, warm, and full of quiet understanding. But the twist came when Keanu approached that crew member the next day with a simple thank you. He wanted to see their reaction, to catch a hint of recognition in their eyes. But instead he saw only confusion and a sincere smile, not the smile of someone hiding a secret, but the smile of someone who genuinely admired his kindness without any hidden meaning. Keanu realized he had been wrong. The writer was still a mystery. Jimmy shook his head in disbelief, laughing softly from suspense. Keanu continued and said the turning point arrived 1 week later. During the final day of filming, the entire crew gathered for a wrap-up meeting. Everyone exchanged hugs, applause, and grateful words. Keanu felt the familiar warmth of an ending, but he also felt a quiet ache. The mystery of the notes still lived inside him, unanswered and incomplete. When the meeting ended, he returned to his trailer one last time. The sun was setting, casting warm orange light across the lot. He pushed the door open and froze. Sitting in the middle of the table was the wooden box. But he had not placed it there. It had been in his bag, zipped, sealed, untouched. He walked closer and saw something resting on top of it, a final note, folded cleanly in perfect symmetry. He opened it slowly, aware that this might be the last message he ever received from the anonymous writer. Inside were words that struck him with more force than anything before. The note read, "You inspired strangers to be kinder without asking for praise. You reminded us that gentle actions matter. You changed a tired place into a hopeful one. And that is why your story must go beyond this set. The world needs your kindness more than we do." Keanu felt his eyes burn for a moment. He said he stood alone in that trailer feeling something shift inside him, something deep and healing, because someone believed that the kindness he had given away in small pieces could ripple outward far beyond what he imagined. It was not about mystery anymore. It was about connection, compassion, and the unseen hearts that walk beside us without introducing themselves. Jimmy wiped away a quiet tear. The audience sniffed and softened. Keanu said he never discovered who wrote the notes, and maybe that was the point. Kindness does not need a face. It only needs a direction. He brought the wooden box to the Tonight Show because he wanted people to understand that the smallest gestures can rewrite someone's life in ways we never see. He wanted to pass the message onward, not hide it in silence. But before Jimmy could speak, Keanu added a final twist. He said something strange happened as he prepared the box for the show tonight. Something that suggested the mystery might not be finished yet. Something that hinted the anonymous writer might still be closer than anyone thought. Keanu took a slow breath as the studio lights dimmed slightly. The room wrapped itself in quiet anticipation, and every person listening leaned forward as if drawn by an invisible thread. Jimmy Fallon placed both hands on the desk, eyes wide, knowing that this was the final turn of a story that had already touched every heart in the room. The wooden box sat between them like a symbol of everything unspoken and everything beautiful that had unfolded. Keanu said that on the morning of the Tonight Show, he opened the wooden box to choose which notes he would bring. He wanted to select the ones that meant the most, the ones that shaped him, the ones that carried the deepest human truths. He sat at his kitchen table in the quiet early light, the soft glow touching the papers as he gently lifted each note one by one, feeling the weight of memories flowing back to him. He explained that while sorting through the notes, something unusual happened. He discovered a folded paper that had never been there before. It was not one of his notes. It was not from the crew member he suspected earlier, and it was not the familiar, elegant handwriting that had guided him through the earlier mystery. It was something new. The handwriting was softer, rounder, almost trembling, as if the writer had been nervous while writing it. Jimmy leaned even closer, barely blinking. The audience stayed silent in deep suspense, some holding their breath without realizing it. Keanu described how his heart beat differently as he unfolded that fresh note. He knew instantly that this message was not old, it was not from years ago. It was new, placed inside the box very recently, perhaps even within the last few days. The paper still smelled faintly of fresh ink. He read the note aloud inside his quiet home, and the message was short but powerful. The writer said the world still needs your quiet strength and your gentle reminders. Do not stop sharing your kindness, because someone out there is always waiting for a moment of light. Keanu paused after reading it, touched but confused. He looked around his empty home, trying to understand how the note found its way into the box. The audience reacted with soft murmurs. Jimmy raised his brows in disbelief, asking how anyone could place a note inside something so personal without being noticed. Keanu explained that he checked the box carefully. He checked his home, and he even called a close friend to ask if they had played a small prank. But no one knew anything about it. The mystery felt alive again, and this time more present, more immediate, almost as if the writer was stepping closer. Keanu continued and said he almost removed the note from the box before coming on the show. He was unsure if he should share it. He wondered if it was too personal, too fresh, or too confusing. But something inside him told him that everything in the box existed for a reason, that each message represented a piece of a larger journey. A journey built on quiet compassion and unseen support. So he left the note inside, trusting that the right moment would reveal itself. Jimmy asked gently if he believed the anonymous writer might still be someone close, someone watching, someone who cared deeply but preferred to remain unseen. Keanu smiled softly, the kind of smile that carried gratitude and humility at the same time. He said he no longer cared about the identity of the writer. He cared about the message, the intention, the light behind the words. He realized the notes were not about mystery, they were about connection. The audience grew emotional again as Keanu spoke about the beauty of unseen kindness. He said that many people carry heavy hearts, many walk through life feeling unnoticed, many fight silent battles that no one hears about. But a few gentle words at the right time can shift everything. He said that the notes taught him to pay deeper attention to others, to listen more carefully, to understand that even the smallest gesture can become a lifeline. Keanu then looked directly into the camera, his voice steady and full of calm sincerity. He said that if someone watching had ever felt invisible, overwhelmed, or unimportant, he wished they could understand one simple truth, that their presence mattered, that their quiet strength mattered, that their kindness mattered. Even if no one said it out loud, kindness echoed in places they would never see, and that echo could lift someone from the edge without them ever knowing. Jimmy placed a hand on his chest, deeply moved. He told Keanu that the world rarely hears stories like this, stories of silent generosity instead of loud performance. He thanked him for bringing something real, something human, something unforgettable to the Tonight Show. The audience clapped softly at first, then louder, standing in appreciation, their applause carrying warmth rather than excitement. Keanu waited for the applause to settle before adding the final piece of his story. He said that as he prepared for the show, he realized something important. The anonymous notes were never meant to be solved like a puzzle. They were meant to guide him toward understanding the deeper purpose of his small experiment. The experiment was never about apology notes. It was about creating a ripple of kindness that grew larger than he ever intended. He said that somewhere along the journey, the mysterious writer understood him better than he understood himself. They saw that he needed encouragement too, that even those who give kindness often need it returned. He said that someone out there had been quietly watching his heart. Not his fame, not his success, but his heart. And that someone believed he could spread hope beyond film sets and stages. Then Keanu smiled in a humble, soft way and said he brought the wooden box to Jimmy because he wanted to pass the ripple onward. He wanted the world to remember that laughter, compassion, and small gestures could change lives, not just in dramatic ways, but in everyday moments. He wanted people to know that being gentle was not weakness. It was strength, the kind of strength that reaches deeper than anyone realizes. Jimmy stood up and embraced him warmly. The audience rose again, some wiping tears, others smiling with admiration. The wooden box remained on the desk, glowing softly under the studio lights. No longer a mystery box, but a symbol, a reminder that the smallest words can save the heaviest hearts, and that unseen kindness often shapes the world more than loud actions ever could. As the show prepared to cut to break, Jimmy laughed suddenly, wiping his eyes and saying he understood now why he could not stop laughing earlier. It was not from comedy, but from the strange, beautiful truth that kindness still existed in places people never looked. And Keanu looked at him with gentle amusement, touched by the honesty in his words. The cameras began to fade out, the applause echoed warmly, and the wooden box remained in the center of the desk, carrying inside it a collection of kindness that had traveled from one tired crew room to a global stage, whispering the same message over and over again, that gentle words matter, humble actions matter, and unseen kindness saves more hearts than anyone ever knows.